I'm a computer science student, and I've been trying to build up a solid portfolio of real-world projects. At the same time, my Gmail inbox was a complete disaster. Thousands of unread emails, mostly random promos for things I swore I never signed up for. So I figured, why not solve both problems at once? I built a Chrome extension called InboxWhiz. It connects you to your Gmail and shows you the top senders that are currently cluttering up your inbox, allows you to quickly see what those emails are, and helps you delete and unsubscribe in bulk, so your inbox actually feels manageable again. So today, I wanted to share the story of how I built InboxWhiz, what went right, what went wrong, and what I wish I knew before starting. I had never built a Chrome extension before, so I started where I normally do when learning something new and watched a couple of tutorials. I'm one of those people who watches tutorials at 2 times speed and barely has the patience to finish it before trying to go and apply it to my own thing. So after finishing a simple pop-up tutorial and skimming through the Chrome documentation, I dove right into developing InboxWhiz. I started with plain JavaScript, HTML, and CSS because that's what all the tutorials and that documentation used, but the features piled up very quickly. Gmail integration, senders list, modals, batch actions. Things got messy very quickly. My entire code base was basically a million JavaScript functions generating HTML with not enough rhyme or reason to keep me from completely wanting to pull my hair out trying to remember how on earth this all fits together. Now that I think about it, this is probably where my deep-seated loathing of JavaScript originated. So there I was one night, sitting and staring at the complete disaster, spaghetti code nightmare of my own creation, having no idea where to even start with the next feature I needed, and I finally had to face my first mistake. There had to be a better way. So I sat down and I refactored the entire thing in React. The thing about that is that I had minimal exposure to React. I only briefly encountered it in class, and I had never actually built any real apps with it. So I had to learn it on the go. Mistake number 2. Learn it before you use it. I've heard a lot of people have the opposite problem where they get stuck in tutorial hell and never have the confidence to actually get started. But for me, I tend to dive right into things too fast and oftentimes realize I need to go back to the drawing board and learn a little bit more of the fundamentals first. I especially faced a bit of a learning curve with React because I had previously worked with Flutter, and that was a lot more object-oriented, and I preferred more object-oriented architecture patterns, which I couldn't easily translate to React. I had to learn a whole new system. But it did pay off in the end. The code became much more modular and scalable, and suddenly it felt possible to build new features without everything breaking. Around this time, I also started using GitHub issues and milestones to keep track of bugs that were coming up and all the new feature ideas I had. All the MVP features went into one milestone, and all future ideas and bugs went into the backlog. This really helped me avoid feature creep and stay focused on building a minimum viable product. I tracked only what was necessary for the MVP, but then I was able to capture everything else for later. So I was able to, have all these new ideas, but not necessarily have it derail my project and have it go on and on and on, as feature creep goes. Around this time, I also started doing a little bit of market research. I was stalking a few of the other similar Chrome extensions on the Chrome Web Store. I was scoping out their reviews, especially the bad ones, just to find out what people were wanting and what they were lacking and what kind of pain points I could solve with some future features. And I was able to use those insights to prioritize what future features I'd want to make InboxWhiz stand out. So finally, I had the project working. I had all the base functionality in place, and it was running perfectly on my machine. I had a couple of friends try it out on theirs, just passing the extension around on a USB drive, and we found a couple of bugs, like some text disappearing when it was in dark mode. It was all quick fixes, so then it was time to release my creation into the world. To do that, I had to go through 2 separate approval processes: the Chrome Web Store approval and the Google Auth verification, since I was using the Gmail API. Both of these required a homepage, and a privacy policy. So I bought a domain and I threw together a quick website with some plain HTML and CSS, and I hosted it for free on GitHub Pages. The Chrome Web Store approval actually went through pretty quickly. My extension was published. But Google Auth verification was a completely different story. Now, if you've never used Gmail APIs before, here's a quick aside, because this was not something I knew going in. Even though my extension worked perfectly, the moment a user tried to sign in with their Google account, they'd see a big scary warning. Google hasn't verified this app. It looked super sketchy, and I knew no one was going to feel comfortable clicking through that. And even worse, Google actually enforces a hard limit on unverified apps. Only 100 total users are allowed ever when you haven't gone through their verification process. So, what is this verification? Basically, if your app uses sensitive scopes, like reading or deleting emails, Google wants to make sure you're not doing anything shady with that data, and that's totally fair. But the process is pretty intense. The Google Cloud Verification Center has a list of requirements needed to get approved. At first glance, it all seemed doable. A link to my homepage, detailed privacy policy, a YouTube video showing the full OAuth flow, and a full write-up demonstrating why exactly my app needed the scopes I requested. But over the next few weeks, I started getting email after email from the Google team flagging tiny issues that I had already addressed. For example, your homepage is missing a link to your privacy policy, except it wasn't. It was right there, just in the footer. So I dragged the link up to the top of the page just to make them happy, but this back and forth went on for weeks. Every single time I thought I'd crossed the last hurdle, another small correction would pop up. And finally, after it felt like jumping through every single hoop imaginable, I got one more email. It was referencing a requirement vaguely labeled additional requirements. And that's where I learned about the CASA assessment. If your app uses Gmail data and is going to be used by the general public, you need to undergo a Tier 2 CASA security audit, which costs, wait for it, $540 a year, even with Google's preferred partner discount. I had built this project as a student, for free, in my free time. There was no way I could justify spending that kind of money just to make it official. So I had to make a choice. Either shut it all down or shift my mindset and make it something else. That's when I decided I could open source the project. If I couldn't monetize it, at least I could let it live on as a portfolio piece, something I could point to and say, I built this, it works, and you can see the whole thing. I cleaned up the repo, I wrote a proper README, and I made the code public on GitHub. And honestly, even though this wasn't the ending I'd hoped for, I was still able to make it a win. Building this extension taught me so much more than just coding. I learned how to scope a project, how to adapt when things break, and how to navigate the real-world hurdles no tutorial ever tells you about. So to recap, I'm going to go over the things I felt like I learned and maybe could help you if you're a new developer. So first of all, take the time to understand and learn the technologies you're going to use. If you're anything like me, you may think you have the basics down, but if you find yourself having to Google or ChatGPT every single step, it may be a sign to spend a little bit more time with the tutorial. Learning best practices will save you weeks of headache and rewrites later, and trust me, I've learned this the hard way. But on the flip side, if you're someone who tends to get stuck in tutorial hell and overthink before you write a single line of code, this next one might be more for you. Ship it early. It doesn't have to be perfect. You learn things along the way. These last two may seem contradictory, but learning software development is all about finding that balance. So you should build and practice to expose the gaps in your knowledge, and then learn and watch tutorials to fill those gaps intentionally. And number 3, avoid starting big projects in plain JavaScript. It gets messy very quickly. Use a framework or structure that's able to scale with complexity. This is not a traditional path for Chrome extensions, so let me know if you want a more in-depth video about how I used React and Vite, specifically in the Chrome extension world. And number 4, implement some sort of project management to stay focused and keep track of ideas without derailing your MVP. This was something I struggled with in previous projects, but I think I did pretty well in this project, and GitHub issues really helped. So I'd really recommend that as a starting point. Number 5, know your platform's rules ahead of time, especially if you're going to be integrating with sensitive APIs like Gmail. Try to understand the limitations before you get too far along. And finally, don't stay tied to your initial vision of what your project will be. Just because it doesn't work out the way you wanted it to, doesn't mean it has to be a fail. Find a way to make it work for you. Whether it becomes a polished product, an open source portfolio piece, or just a learning detour, it's still a win. If you're a student or a self-taught dev wondering whether you're ready to ship something, you are. Start small, aim for done, and be open to learning hard stuff along the way. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, please give it a like. If you've ever built a project that totally spiraled out of control, tell me about it in the comments. I'm planning to post more videos about being a CS student, working on software projects, maybe doing some leak code or tech deep dives. So if that sounds interesting to you, feel free to subscribe and stick around. See you in the next one.